All right. So I am wearing my 1950s best
I love that.
because we're going golden age of Hollywood, babe.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Sillage and Sorcery, a podcast where we unravel the secrets behind scent. I'm one of your co-hosts, B. Sampson of Venus Invictus, and I'm joined with
Melissa Sifjardóttir of Sif Sniffs.
And today we're descending into the shadowy, damp, and utterly enchanting forest to meet one of perfumery's most legendary ingredients, Oakmoss.
I've been getting a lot of requests for moss lately.
Yeah?
But also I was just in New Orleans.
I have a question before we jump into kind of like the history of it of all. Do you have any fragrances where moss is like a very big highlight of the scent?
Not a big highlight of the scent, but the Hangman, I wanted a little bit of a mossy vibe. Also because the Hangman is my scent to Odin. And swamps and bogs are associated with Frigg, his wife.
Love that. For me, it's my fragrance Pothos. It's a very mossy, musky scent. So this humble lichen is the cornerstone of the entire Chypre fragrance family. And it's the secret behind lasting power, depth of countless classics, but its story is also one of modern controversy, regulation, and adaptation. We're going to explore its magical harvest, its complex chemistry, and why it's currently restricted, and how that has forever changed the perfumer's palette. So let's start off with, what is oak moss? Do you have an idea of what oak moss is?
It is a type of moss. No.
Let's clear something up. It's actually not moss.
This is like Civid being a cat mongoose thing.
It's actually, and it doesn't only grow on oak. So its scientific name is Evernia prunostri, and it's a lichen. It's a symbiotic organism of fungus and algae, and it grows in lush, tufted formations on the bark of older trees, not just oak, but also fir, pine, almond tree, primarily in the forests of Central and Southern Europe. When harvested, it has a pale greenish-gray color, but its magic is in its scent. It's a deep, complex aroma that smells like damp, ancient forest after rain. It's woody, but at the same time earthly, slightly sweet, but definitely has a distinctive dry, almost leathery undertone. It's the smell of wet bark, crumbling soil, and shadows. It's so important in perfumery.
And people are always looking for a petrichor.
Well, people always are looking for a petrichor scent, and in my opinion, you can't find a good one without a little bit of oak moss in it. So the fact that it's fused as being part fungus, part algae, it's like a literal symbiotic organism. Do you feel like that makes it more magical, or is it just a thing of balance and symbiosis?
I think it's a alchemy, right? Things that kind of, once they get together, make it magical.
I didn't really look too much into like the folkloric aspect of oak moss for this episode, but in witchcraft, I only know oak moss is like an ingredient for grounding ritual. Do you have any associations that you ascribe to oak moss?
Well, mosses in general are associated with Frigg, and she's, besides being Odin's wife, is also this kind of like grounding, very like foundational kind of deity. One of the things when I think of Frigg is like the matriarch and how the matriarch needs to keep everything steady. And it would make sense that she would be associated with this kind of grounding energy.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it.
The matriarch is not the one fighting at the Thanksgiving dinner about how Trump is. The matriarch is just like, hey, we're going to have a calm dinner. Maybe we take the politics for some other time.
Yes, yes. This does have practical beginnings, though, because if you've ever held an oak moss or a lichen, you know that it has absorbative properties and a pretty pleasant scent. So dried oak moss historically has been used for stuffing saddles and pillows, which is interesting. Can you imagine laying your head on an oak moss pillow? It sounds like one part romantic and enchanting and another part like really disgusting.
My first thought was like, that is some straight like way to get to the Fae realm.
Right.
That's what the Fae want. Like, let's be real.
So I do want to kind of touch on the birth of a legend. Oakmoss's true identity in perfumery began in the early 20th century. Perfumer Francois Coty used it as a key fixative in his 1917 masterpiece, Chypre. This fragrance created the entire olfactory family, where oak moss is providing the crucial dark, earthy base that grounds bright bergamot and floral heart. So that's what I have for kind of like a little bit of the history. I do now want to get into some of the chemistry and controversy regarding the allergens and regulation of oak moss. So the two main allergens in oak moss are atronol and chloroatronol. These two
I told you, hardest
compounds,
part of your job. After doing
yeah,
last week, hardest part of your job.
I'm telling you, all these scientific names for these chemicals is a mouthful. There's one in particular that I'm going to say in a little bit, and you're going to be like, sure, sure. That's long and complex. So these two compounds are the strongest allergens in natural oak moss absolute. They're known to cause allergic contact dermatitis in sensitive individuals. They're not originally present in the fresh lichen, but are a product of the degradation of the fresh lichen. So once it starts drying and breaking down is when these substances, atranorin and chloroatrenorin, come out. So the
Excellent job.
regulatory, thank you. The regulatory response was decisive. 2017, the European Union outright banned atronol and chloroatronol from use in cosmetic products due to the high number of contact allergies they caused. But the allergenic profile doesn't just stop there. Oak moss contains other compounds known to cause skin sensitization. So obviously we have the atranorin and chloroatrenorin. There's evernic acid, another documented sensitizer found in the lichen. There's usnic acid, commonly in many lichens, known to cause allergic contact dermatitis. And there's,
You
give me
can do
one
it.
second,
I have faith in you.
fumar rhodo acid.
Excellent. Yep. I've heard of that so many times. You pronounced it completely correctly.
Yeah, that
That one.
acid and stictic acid are the other lichen acids present that can also trigger reactions.
And people are sleeping on it. Sorry.
People were sleeping on it.
Like
Yeah.
when you're going over all of this list, I'm like, people are sleeping on it. So if we're using it in perfume and like, well, not us, but if the fragrance industry was using it in perfume and it was causing these crazy ass reactions, what is going on? What was going on in the day when they were sleeping on it?
That's crazy. It's crazy to think about. Imagine laying your head down, waking up, just like contact dermatitis all over you. No, thank you.
And this is why people died in the 30s from their teeth.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. So it's this complex cocktail of natural sensitizers is what makes oak moss such a regulatory challenge and nightmare. The regulation was really a watershed moment. For those of us that never got to experience a pre-ban Chypre, what do you think the biggest thing is that we're missing? Is it a matter of strength, or is there a quality that's been lost? Because in my opinion, I think that there's a certain level of quality that no longer exists in perfume because of this regulation.
I think it's quality for sure. But also absolutes are real powerful, right?
Very powerful, yeah.
And when you're looking at something like a fixative, that's what keeps your fragrance forever. So we're also losing a little bit of that absolute with a fixative staying power.
It's interesting. You see a lot of perfumes, specifically like these to early 2000s, have gone under reformulation. And I think a lot of that is due to new restrictions and regulations on the fragrance industry. I think it's quite interesting. Let's talk about the allergen management in the industry now. So one of the main primary approaches has been to treat oak moss absolute to significantly reduce the levels of atronol and chloroatronol. There's concentration limits. International standards strictly limit how much oak moss extract can be used in consumer products. However, it is worth noting that even treated extracts may still cause reactions in highly sensitive individuals, likely due to those other potential allergens that I mentioned earlier. But here's what modern perfumers are working with today. There's rectified oak moss absolute, which has low atronol. This is the treated natural oak moss stripped of the most problematic compound. There's oak moss CO2 extract, which is a cleaner, greener smelling version. There's reconstructions and bases. Many perfumers now use synthetic bases like Veramoss, which is what I use, Evernil, and Evernil to recreate the impression of natural oak moss. It feels like perfumers are now painting a picture of a forest rather than using actual forest materials. From a magical perspective, do you think that the reconstructed note of oak moss carries the same spirit or essence, or is the power in the actual lichen?
I think that when synthetics are used appropriately, if we can make a synthetic version that's ethical, I think that that is just as powerful.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think there is a place though for natural materia, especially in your own personal practice or magical practice.
Just maybe not sell it to people.
So this regulation, on oak moss didn't just change formulas, it changed the entire landscape of perfumery. It's since created a cult following of vintage perfumes pre 2017, where oak moss's full feral power remains prominent. But to truly understand the magic of oak moss, you need to experience it in its natural habitat, a masterpiece of perfumery. And there is one fragrance that we're talking about today where oak moss is a key player. It's a legend, it's a reference point. I'm going to hand it over to you to do the deep dive.
It's literally one of two notes that is listed in the actual scent description for this
Wow.
fragrance. It is oak moss and quote unquote floral notes. That's what the description for the fragrance of the week is. Yeah. We're talking about Max Factor Epris. I had to watch a video from the 1980s to know how to pronounce it. And I'm going to start off with a quote. People are not born glamorous. Glamour is created. And that is from our good buddy for this entire episode, Maximilian Faktorowicz, who was born on September 15th, 1877, which makes him a Virgo, which is going to make a lot more sense when we start getting into the 1930s.
Okay.
In Lodz, which is a city in modern Poland. However, when he was born, it was under the Russian Empire. I will say, and I complained about it so many times in my notes for the episode, the sources for Max Factor have been so ridiculously frustrating and contradictory. Because
Really?
sometimes they're like, oh, Poland. And it's like, so Russia. And then I need to look into this a little bit more. And it's just that where he was born is now Poland, but at the time it was part of Russia. He started working really early in his childhood, but it's also the 1880s, so no one is kind of surprised. He is credited one of his early jobs, which was selling concessions at a theater in Lodz, as being the origin of his love for make-believe. And he looks at the performing arts as make-believe, which is interesting if we know more about Max Factor. Like in many areas of the world at the time, wigs were a whole part of the identity of aristocracy, particularly Russian aristocracy. So Max lands an apprenticeship with the most prominent wig maker in Lodz around age 9. He would then transition his skills with wigs over to makeup and practice on the same performers that he had seen while working at the theater in Lodz.
Cosmetics. Love that. Can I just say I've heard of Max Factor before? I'm sure if my partner Dakota were in here, they would be like, Max Factor? The only reason why I know about Max Factor is from watching a video of Aaron Parsons talk about vintage Max Factor lipstick. So that is my only knowledge of Max Factor.
Around age 14, he's so influential in the world of wigs and makeup that he lands a job with the Russian Grand Opera. This takes his fame with wigs and makeup outside of the city of Lodz. When he's 18, he's automatically enrolled in the Russian military because of compulsory military service. So he takes 4 years off from wigs and makeup to participate in the hospital corps. However, by the time he's out of the military, he is so popular with wigs and makeup that he gets an invitation to work for Tsar Nicholas and the Imperial Russian Opera.
Whoa.
You took like this whole sabbatical and you're still famous.
Right.
Although there is some kind of like controversy with that because he is not only Polish, but he's also Jewish. And there's rising anti-Semitism at the beginning of the 1900s. So there is some speculation that he may have been hired not only for his great work, but also so that they could keep an eye on him. This is particularly prevalent with his marriage to his wife, Esther. One source said that marriage between Poles and Jews were not allowed, but he was also Polish and Jewish. So I don't know if like he was just not allowed to be married or if he couldn't marry his wife.
Yeah.
So they had to get married in secret and then they lived separately. Regardless, they still had 3 kids together, which is fucking impressive.
Yeah.
Frankly. And despite this acclaim that he was getting for wigs and makeup, he decides to stow away cash because of the rising anti-Semitism and come to America. So he does that. He comes to Ellis Island and then goes to St. Louis.
Wow. Of all places, St. Louis.
Why the fuck are we going to St. Louis? Especially like the proud New Yorkers that we both kind of have history of being. What the hell? But St. Louis was having a World's Fair in 1904. And Max was looking to launch his company, his brand at the World's Fair. I should note what makeup kind of was like at this time. Most people were not really wearing makeup because we're still right in the Victorian age. It's 1904. Lipstick is for hussies, right?
Mhm.
Or stage performers. And Max kind of knows this, but he still rents out a booth at the World's Fair and sells his lipstick. Max himself is credited with saying only actresses and harlots will be seen in lipstick, not respectable women. So we love this. He himself knows that like what he is an expert in is only for harlots and actresses.
Love that.
He, by all accounts, it seems that he wanted to create enough money to then have his own store. And his booth was kind of like his way of getting the funding to be more established. When the World's Fair was over, he went over to his booth to collect his products and his money. And he found out that his business partner, who was working with him in the booth, had stolen everything. The money and the product.
Who was his business partner?
From some reports, it was a guy he met on the boat coming over from Russia to Ellis Island.
Okay.
And so it seems like it wasn't someone he knew really intimately and then ended up swindling him out of everything. He then opens up a barber shop with his uncle and brother, but he hates it. Then in 1906, his wife Esther dies of an apparent aneurysm.
God.
Because he is a man, and this is 1906, he just writes to all of the people he knows in Russia and says, please send me a wife. And he gets one. That whole thing is crazy. That he was just like, my wife died. I don't know what to do with children. I'm doing this like we're typing, but
Yeah.
this is 1906. So we're going to say this like, oh, my wife has died. Please send me a wife. He apparently hates this wife and they get divorced in less than 2 years, but they do have his 4th child in the interim.
Okay.
Then he marries one of his neighbors, a woman named Jenny, and this is his 3rd wife, and he will stay married to her until he dies. But in 2 years, he went through 3 wives. So I love that for him. I know. He moves to LA in the fall of 1908. What I think is so interesting about like this going through wives and then moving to LA is like Max Factor is so associated with women, and like a lot of his philosophy, which we'll get into later, is never like women are ugly. It's just that they need to enhance what they have and downplay what they don't, right? And yet when it comes to raising his children, like he needs to have a wife at his side in order to do that. Like I was like, my guy, you could be such a feminist icon.
I know. It was a
And
different
yet here
time.
you are. There was so much potential. So in 1908, LA is not the movie making capital that we know it as today. It was mostly farmland and farming. And in 1907, so a year before Max Factor gets there, the first film is actually filmed in Los Angeles. is called The Count of Monte Cristo, because
Yeah.
I hardcore looked into some film history for this episode, but it's called The Count of Monte Cristo, and they didn't want to use Central Park for all of their at-water scenes. So they keep talking about like, oh, the temperature's really good there, and it's a more, moderate climate. So when you need to film for 3 months, you can do that. Whereas all of the filming that was done previously was in places like New York and Philly,
New
places that we
Jersey. Yep.
love to death. But neither, as people who live there, we know that we get maybe 2 months that are good, and the rest of the time it sucks. It's not as kind of temperate as LA is.
I feel like there was something that I once heard about the person who created moving pictures, so like movies, and how he tried to patent it.
But he couldn't because Thomas Edison owned the patent for it.
Right. And so people moved also to LA because it was far away enough. Like back in the day, they would have to like send letters that would take weeks, months to get to you. So they just went to out west to start filming.
So yeah, that is definitely a part of it. Thomas Edison did own the patent for films, and that was like a whole big thing where they were going to LA and they were just like, catch me. To the
Right.
point that Thomas Edison actually hired the Pinkerton agency to kind of like keep an
Yes.
eye on the film sets in LA. So Max Factor opens up Max Factor and Company in Glendale, California. And Max Factor kind of immediately starts selling cosmetics to the motion picture industry, primarily because he's the only person who carries grease paint, which is a form of stage makeup that was popular at the time that they were also using in films. But grease paint kind of sucks for film. It was developed for theater. So if you're in a play for 2 hours and you're on stage, that looks a lot different than if you're outside in the California sun for 12 hours filming.
Right.
So Max Factor gets to work and he develops his own form of grease paint. And he also works on making it in different shades because it is black and white. So the requirements are different for what's going to show up on camera
Mm-hmm.
and how it's going to look and how it's going to convey in black and white photography.
Yes. Isn't it a thing where, like, back in the day, like, before color in film, when someone was wearing lipstick, it was usually, like, a very dark, like, plum color because red wouldn't show up. It would show up neutral.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was part of what Max Factor kind of discovered and then employed when he was on film sets. He also created like iconic lip shapes that would convert to film and would be distinguishable for like actresses at the time. That's all Max Factor. So he launches Supreme grease paint in 1914, and it comes in 12 different shades. I would also like to point out, harken back to last season, that Glossier in 2014 had 3 shades for their foundation, and Max Factor had 12 in 1914. Every once in a while, I get to do like the best kind of historical clapbacks, and I feel like that was one where I was just like, really? Max Factor has 12, and Glossier, you had 3?
That's pretty iconic.
Get fucking better. When films convert to color, he develops panchromatic makeup, which also helps in this like ongoing transition to making movies more lifelike. And the major difference is that panchromatic has some powder already built in so that you're not as shiny as you would be with the Supreme grease paint. He begins to apply his products to Hollywood actresses personally and is often credited in a bunch of films for his work. And the list of like people who love him is crazy. We're talking Betty Davis, Jean Harlow, Judy Garland. Like, if you can think of an old school loved actress, they were working with Max Factor. And oftentimes these actresses would go to Max Factor Studios to get like their coloring done, to get impressions from Max Factor in order to like, find out what is going to make them even better for the stage.
Wow. That's really cool.
I thought it was awesome. Lucille Ball, the reason she's a redhead is because of Max Factor.
What's behind so many iconic looks?
he would say to people and just say like, hey, this would work better for you. This would make you more iconic. This would bring out your eyes, your lips, your great facial structure, things like that. One of the actresses in the 1920s had two different colored eyes. So he gave her a bob to kind of distract from her eyes. And that's why we get all of the flappers in the 1920s having bobs. One of the things that he does develop in the 1920s is called color harmony. It is both a product and a technique. It highlights how certain colors work better on certain skin tones. So if you've ever gotten really frustrated with whether or not I'm warm, neutral, or cool, you can blame Max Factor for developing this idea of like certain colors don't work with certain skin tones. Personally, when I was reading about color harmony though, I'm like, oh, this is a cash grab because now everything has to be custom blended per actress and actor, because actors were also wearing makeup, right?
Right.
That everything has to be custom blended because everybody has like unique undertones and only Max Factor can develop the color harmony for
Perfect
this
color
particular
harmony.
person. So when I was first reading about it, I'm like, oh, this is such a cash grab.
I mean, work, bitch.
And so color harmony is so popular that when he renovates his big salon in Hollywood, he has different rooms that are labeled. One is blondes only, brunettes only, brunettes only, and redheads only. And when he has these rooms kind of like launched and has this like ribbon cutting ceremony, he has a different Hollywood starlet to open up each room. Jean Harlow, Rochelle Hudson, Claudette Colbert, and Ginger Rogers, respectively. Yeah, once again, we're talking like every single Hollywood icon went through the Max Factor studio, including, I think it's the wife of Benito Mussolini's son. But it was like in the 1930s before Benito Mussolini was
Right.
Mussolini. But still, there was a ton of like famous people who went through the Max Factor studio in order to get their like colors done and to find out what works for them. They could also, of course, buy the makeup that Max Factor was using on them. In case you're wondering what a brownette was, because I had to look that up.
A person with brown hair?
Well, no, because there's brunettes,
Right.
right? And that's a
True.
whole other room. So what's a brownette? It's light brown hair. Yes. And brownette apparently is a term that was developed and coined by Max Factor himself. But now
Okay.
we don't use it.
No.
So light brown hair and fair skin is a brownette.
Okay.
Second thing that he creates is society makeup. So he has all of this stuff for the movies. Society makeup is kind of the makeup for the average person. Since we know that makeup and lipstick were for hussies and harlots, to use his own term, by pairing society with makeup, we also get the ability to make it for everybody. So that's when you start getting, in the 1920s, flappers wearing lipstick. And a lot of that is because of Max Factor.
Okay.
This is where we get shitty, right? So like we were kind of liking him except the anti-feminist thing. But with Panchromatic and then Pancake, which he makes for Technicolor, there is a lot of blackface and a lot of putting a foundation on the skin that does not necessarily match your natural skin tone and kind of the ongoing racism with that. In 1925, over 600 gallons of makeup, which is insane, was used to match the skin tone for extras. Because on the set of Ben-Hur, some of it was filmed in Italy and some of it was filmed in Los Angeles. So they were using Max Factor's makeup to make the Americans look more Italian. And 600 gallons of makeup. That's kind of a lot.
It's a lot of makeup.
In 1943, there is a all black cast for the film Stormy Weather. And he creates a shade specifically for Lena Horne, and he calls it Light Egyptian, which Lena Horne is like gorgeous. Like you don't need, she didn't need much. In the 1930s, he also develops a device that looks like Pinhead from Hellraiser, but it's a device that is a helmet you strap on your head with a bunch of little pins on it. And it's designed to show kind of like where your face is not even and what you need to highlight and kind of contour away. All I need to do is just go into the beauty micrometer.
AKA Hell Dimension Machine.
Hell Dimension Machine. Not one of his greater inventions, but some of his other ones are pretty baller. False eyelashes, nail polish, and lip gloss are all things that Max Factor created.
He invented the false lashes?
Yeah, because he had such experience with wigs. And what are false eyelashes except wigs for the eyelashes?
Created falsies. I can't.
We're gagged.
I'm gagged. That's iconic.
Or lip gloss? I'm wearing lip gloss right now.
Right, gloss. And what was the third thing you said?
Nail polish.
So he's basically the founder of modern makeup.
With Pancake, it was stolen from sets so often. So Pancake is panchromatic makeup, which was developed for Technicolor. There was also Pan Stick, which was just the same thing, but in a different form. It was stolen from sets so often that about $2,000 worth of the makeup was stolen off of sets for people to use in their private life. Yeah.
I remember hearing about this from Aaron Parsons about how people would just steal it.
Yep. People were just stealing it in order to use it. Even though he developed it for the screen, they were still trying to use it in their personal life. In 1938, Max Factor dies. I read a few conflicting reports about his death, but what I will say is that there are a lot of people who think that there were precursors prior to his death and that his death was slightly shady. There is one report, I didn't go into it too in depth, but there's one report that like he was threatened and then kind of like had a lot of anxiety about it, and that's what led to his death. There's another one of like he got in this horrible accident and then that led to his death. There's all of these things that have weird backgrounds of we don't 100% believe that he would have died if all of these shenanigans didn't happen to him prior.
What?
Because Max Factor is literally the guy who is the name of the brand, they don't 100% know what to do after he dies. And also, this death was not 100% expected. So his oldest son, Frank, legally changes his name to Max Factor Jr. And then he's the one who's in charge of the product development side of the company. Different, like he had 4 sons, and the other 3 were still involved in Max Factor, just different areas of the business. Like one did manufacturing, one was in charge of like the business, back end, paperwork kind of stuff. But Frank, aka Max Factor Jr., he's the one who does like the forward-facing product development, working with the celebrities and giving them their colors kind of thing. He's just as good as his father. One of his first creations that he develops is True Color lipstick that launches in 1940. But originally he hired a couple to test it, where he would put the lipstick on the woman and just have them make out for 8 hours. But the couples kept quitting because, I don't know about you, but kissing for 8 hours does not sound fun. I think it would be fun the first like half hour. And then you'd just be like, you know what? No, I'm not okay with this. But they kept quitting. So he developed a lipstick testing device that basically was false lips that would keep getting smacked at different levels of pressure. So he could test out how the lipstick would wear. And then that's the lipstick, the iconic red lipstick. It came in 6 different red shades when it launched in 1940. Max Factor Jr. is also credited with putting mascara in a tube. Prior to that, it was like a little black
It was
tape
like a little tray that you would,
that you would take with a brush and then you would brush it on your eyelashes. He's the one who said, let's put it in a tube. Bam. It's so many things that like we totally take for granted now. And we just think like that's just how cosmetics have always been.
It's always been, right.
But Max Factor and Max Factor Jr. both were behind iconic makeup things. He also is behind the creation of the first concealer and the first primers and highlighters. Yeah. Because Max Factor, I think in the 1920s, starts breaking into skincare, and then they develop specifically primers that are designed to kind of smooth the face before you put on foundation. In 1955, the company launches its first fragrance called Electrique. However, once again, because the sources fucking suck for Max Factor, I did find that they had Signature by Max Factor, which launched in 1950, but that was for men, and it was considered an aftershave. Okay. So I don't know if that's why it's not being considered, because it's an aftershave. But then some sources I saw said aftershave and cologne. So I was like,
Two
I
in
feel like
one.
it should count,
Yeah.
but I also feel like fragrance oftentimes only the stuff for women counts, and colognes are just kind of like off to the side for some
Yeah.
reason. But we're gonna fix that next week.
Shit.
Spoiler alert. So that is fun. It might be signature. It might be electric. Pick your battle.
Choose your own adventure.
Yep. Salvador Dali was the one who was actually commissioned to make the bottle for Electric, but he said that he would announce it at a press tour, at like this huge press function. So they rented out a hotel, they like got all these cameras, everything like that. And Salvador Dali was an hour late and then just pulled a light bulb out of his pocket and said, Max Factor Electric. So he didn't even make a bottle. He just took a light bulb. You're making face. Why are we
Wait.
making face?
So was Electric in a light bulb?
Well, yeah. That was like the whole thing, is that like, oh,
They
it's
were like,
electric.
bravo, the light bulb. Perfume in a light bulb.
But that's all of the surrealist whole thing. Like, I'm not surprised that that's what Salvador Dali is doing, right? Like, it's just like, I gave zero shits about it. Here you go, light bulb. It is described with top notes of aldehydes and lily of the valley, which we love. Middle notes of carnation, lilac, jasmine, tuberose, and orange blossom. And the base notes are musk, amber, and sandalwood.
Okay.
So pretty standard. I wouldn't say it's like anything super inventive.
Groundbreaking. Yeah.
Because Max Factor's been around since the 1900s, their move to kind of create fragrances was to bring more young people into the brand. Because at this point in time, if silent film actresses are in the ads for Max Factor and it's 1950, we're not looking super cool, right? That's like 30 years. That's my grandma's brand. And they're trying to reinvent themselves. So they are coming out with all of these fragrances. Throughout the 1950s and 70s, the brand releases a ton of fragrances: Golden Woods, Aquarius, Primatif, and others. Almost all of them are discontinued now. Then, in 1981, the brand releases its most famous fragrance, Epris. We'll say that we talked about it before, but the literal only note that was like any specific was Oakmoss, and then just
Oakmoss
florals.
and florals.
But many of the reviews have said that castoreum and civet are also part of the notes, but that could also just be that like earthy part. But at the time, it was just being marketed as like oak moss and florals. But I'm going to give you another super cool review that I found on the internet. Are you ready?
I love a review. Yes, let's go. It's good to know that you can find a knockout moss monster, an earthy, smoky, bitter floral that will scream pong to the normcore sect for a fraction of the cost at some overblown excuse of a sheepra in a garish-looking bling bottle and $300 price tag. Epris was a CVS dark corner specialty, a bottom row of glass case. Pharmacon. Even Epris spokes Angel Smith asserted in its commercial, a little unsettling, a little disturbing, and it's damn wow.
So it did cover that one of the big factors behind Epris was that Jacqueline Smith, who was a Charlie Secret angel, I don't know if that's the position she was in, because I think Farrah Fawcett was in the middle, but here we go, was behind all the advertising for Epris. So in my historical deep dive, I also found the commercial from the 1980s with Jacqueline Smith in it.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I'm so ready. Please share it.
Maybe your mother never told you. There's more to being a woman than minding your manners.
Maybe your mother never told you.
I'm Jacqueline Smith, and being a woman means sometimes taking the first step first. There's a new fragrance that understands. Epris. Epris is a little unsettling, a little disturbing. Epris is a most provocative fragrance. If Mama never told you, I'll tell you. Part of the art of being a woman is knowing when not to be too much of a lady. Epris by Max Factor.
How do we feel?
Iconic. That is so iconic. Maybe your mother never told you. It was giving, sometimes you gotta get a little nasty.
But that's also kind of this like idea
Iconic.
of Oakmoss, right? Is
Yeah.
that like, it's a little dirty, it's a little mossy, it's a little, woodsy.
It's a
And maybe we don't want to be as,
clean
cut and
and
dry
soapy.
and clean.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
yes, You're like,
That was
yes,
so good.
I'm here for this.
I want her to read me a bedtime story. That's how incredible her voice is. Ugh, an
Well,
icon.
just watch some Charlie's Angels and then we
I
can
guess
see
I
her
will. Yeah.
kicking ass and taking names. In the 1970s, the brand underwent a series of mergers and acquisitions, and Max Factor Jr. stepped down. And starting in the 1970s, there are no factors on the board. It's also during the 1970s that Max Factor, as a brand, released Halston fragrances underneath them. And those were super iconic in the 70s. And they were so popular that they almost toppled Chanel.
Yeah.
So I think that that's interesting. However, it didn't stop it from going through all of these mergers and acquisitions. In 1984, X Factor gets lumped in with Playtex, like the stocking company or bras. In 1986, so 2 years later, Playtex and therefore Max Factor gets acquired by Revlon. In 1991, Revlon sells Max Factor to Procter & Gamble for $1.5 billion. In 2010, Procter & Gamble discontinued Max Factor in the US, which could be why you cannot find any of this stuff anymore. But in 2015, we bought Max Factor from Procter & Gamble for $12 billion, which is interesting because it's like 14 years after it was sold for $1 billion.
Yeah.
And it's discontinued in the US. So I don't know how it's worth that much money unless it's just from overseas sales. But even then, I found that interesting. But Coty then starts to relaunch the brand in 2018. And that's what I have for Max Factor and Max Factor Epris.
Wow. Very cool. So
Yeah.
Max Factor exists today in a different iteration.
They're not releasing the fragrances or not releasing anything like that. It just said that they were relaunching the brand. But I haven't seen anything from Max Factor in the last 10 years. No like major launches, no nothing, unless they're just trying to keep it as like a legacy retro thing.
Yeah.
I know it was being sold online starting in 2015, but I haven't seen anything like major.
There is a website for Max Factor.
Now it's just kind of this website now, which I feel like is so sad because it was so iconic and it's so like foundational to what we know makeup to be today
That's
and fragrances
so
to be
wild.
today.
Crazy.
Crazy. So fun episode.
Fun episode. Loved learning about Max Factor. Maximilian Factorium. What was his last name?
Horowitz, I think.
Factorowitz. I love
You
that.
have to go all the way back in my notes. Yes, Factorowitz.
Maximilian Factor.
But I didn't talk about it with the pinhead thing. But if you think that he is a Virgo, that is some Virgo ass shit. We need to make this absolutely perfect. So we're going to make a medieval torture device that you're going to put on your face. When I read that, I was like, yep, Virgo checks out. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
Virgo checks out. We need the perfect face. We need
Right.
to put pins in your face to find out what needs to be highlighted and what needs to be taken down. Sillage and Sorcery is produced by B. Sampson and Melissa Sifjardottir. Research conducted by B. Sampson and Melissa Sifjardottir. It was written by Melissa Sifjardottir and B. Sampson. Our logo was designed by B. Sampson, and it was edited quickly by Melissa Sifjardottir. You can check out our website that has links to alternative places to find us, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, YouTube, if you want to see our lovely faces. And that is www.sillageandsorcery.com. You can also, of course, always share the pod, like the pod, subscribe, follow, just be a generally awesome person who gets alerts from us. That's cool too. You can support us by getting our brands, which are linked in the show notes, as well as on our website. So find us. B usually stays in Philly, but I go all over the country. So if you want to meet me, I am generally on tour. And next year I'm going to even more places. So I would love, 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 love to see you in real life. And, put a face to the name. Wait, no, wait. To see me, IRL, I'll probably give you a hug and freak out. Anyway, love you, and we will see you in the next one. Bye. Do you know this reference? Have you seen Hellraiser?
Have I seen Hellraiser? Am I a homosexual who loves horror movies? Yes. Hello.
Okay.